Hello everyone, I'm Irma Baker. Welcome to our show. If you've watched us often enough, you know that we always like to feature people and opportunities and events, anything that's happening in our area. And today we have one of our favorite local authors, and you may or may not know her by this name because she is a multi-named mystery author here in Northeast Ohio. And so welcome today to Mimi Granger.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I'm always so amazed at the variety the variety of mystery novels, mystery series that you write. And today we're going to talk about you in your persona of Mimi Granger. And Mimi Granger, she kind of combines two of your literary loves, your love of romance novels and your love of mystery novels. So tell us how this all came together.
Well, I was looking for a new hook for a mystery series, for lack of a better word. And I actually started my writing career writing romance, which a lot of my mystery readers don't know. This was many years ago, back in the Stone Ages. I wrote at least 15, don't remember the exact number, but I started out writing historical romance, and I also wrote some contemporary romance, and that was before I switched to mystery. So when I was looking for a new thing to do with mystery, bookstores are very popular in mysteries, bookstores and libraries, books about books. And if you look on the shelves, there's a gazillion billion books set in mystery bookstores, books set in bookstores in old lighthouses, books, that kind of thing. But I wanted something a little different. So I came up with a romance bookstore. The bookstore is called Love Under the Covers, and it's located in fictional, beautiful Tinkers Creek, Ohio. And my heroine is Lizzie Hale, and she's the one who owns the romance bookstore. She's a lover of all romance fiction.
Well, the idea of combining those two areas of your love in the literary world with a fictional and factual location, and in our very own area too. But there is no town of Tinkers Creek. But there is a Tinkers Creek, an actual
There is a
creek.
Tinkers Creek, yes. There's a place in the park called Tinkers Creek. And I love the name, so you got to kind of go with that fun name. My town is actually based on Peninsula, Ohio, which is about halfway between Cleveland and Akron. Peninsula, there's a lot to recommend Peninsula. It's very cute. A few nice restaurants, some nice shops. But the thing that most people know it for, and the thing it is most famous for, is it's smack in the middle of the national park, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. So you've got a lot of outdoorsy things around there. There's bike paths, there's running paths. The train goes through there. I was just recently on the train, and that is great fun. If you're ever looking for something fun to do, the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad, one of the two. It's great, but the train chugs right through the middle of Peninsula. So there's a lot going on there, and that allowed me to create this fictional town. I mean, it looks like Peninsula, but obviously there's a lot going on there, including murders that don't happen in Peninsula. And to create the characters, the person, Lizzie, who owns this romance bookstore, the man who owns the hardware store, the mayor, you've got all these people who show up, then the librarian, people who show up as characters in the books that populate this little town.
Well, it's a wonderful thing because people who read the books can ride through that area, sometimes, oh yeah.
Yes. And in the newest book of the series, the newest book in the series is called Murder of a Mail-Order Bride, and I got to play with the Helltown story. Now, if you're not familiar with that, when the park was first established, the government decided they needed more national parks, and I believe that was back in the 1970s. And they looked at this land. The park is, I believe, 33,000 acres. So they looked at this land and they decided they wanted to put the park there. But there were people living in parts of it. The one town was called Boston, and Boston Township maybe, and they bought up, the government came in and bought up Boston Township. People had to leave. They bought up their homes. There was a lot of protests, but it happened anyway. But then they never did anything for 10 or 15 years. So everything just sat there. Empty houses, empty church, empty school. And it just sat there, and it got this reputation of a ghost town, and people started calling it Hell Town. And you know what happens after that, all the urban legends start. So there was a chemical dump site in the area that the government eventually cleaned up. But knowing that there was the legend of mutants who had grown up near the dump site and now were haunting the woods. There was a legend about a haunted school bus. There was an old school bus parked there for many years, so the haunted school bus. Crybaby Bridge, which has nothing to do with crying babies, but if you park your car there at night, when you get home, you find baby handprints all over your car. Now, what does that have to do with Helltown? I don't know, but that was one of the stories. One of the other fun stories that actually has a basis in fact is the Peninsula Python. Back in the 40s, a circus came through Peninsula and they lost their python. So for years, there has been this story that he's still living out there. He is giant now, of course. How he's living through Ohio winters, I don't know. But they actually used to have a Peninsula Python Festival every summer. So I got to play with all that. Part of Lizzie's investigation in the second book is going to Helltown, which these days is all cleaned up. It's all meadows and natural plants and wildflowers and lovely, wonderful things. But when she visited Tinker's Creek as a child, she and her friends used to go to the old Helltown, you know, and dare each other to go near the school bus, to go near the old haunted church. So it was fun to play with that legend and use it in the story.
You do a lot of research with this. I mean, you're creating a fictional town, but the amount of research and reading and investigating of the locale comes into it. And I remember that with your first book in the series, Death of a Red Hot Rancher, because you talked in that one about bison farms.
Yes, which I know nothing about, by the way. So it's not like I could make up the bison farming stuff. You know, it's funny because I mentioned I started my career writing historical romance. Obviously, if you're writing historical things, you're going to have a ton of research. But you switch to contemporary mysteries set in a town, you know, 6 miles as the crow flies from my house, probably. And you think, okay, I know all this. No, you never do. There's always something to research. The good news is I love research. I know other writers who do not, and it's a chore for them. But I do, and I often get lost in the research. It's real easy to get sucked down those rabbit holes. But I enjoy it. So reading about Helltown, or even reading about bison ranching, which I know, like I said, I knew nothing about, and it was like, oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know, I knew how big they were, because I actually met a dead and stuffed bison, not a real live one, when I was visiting Colorado once, and it was amazing how large those critters are, but I never knew how fast they were. And they can really do some damage. So that was fun to know and to use in the book.
Oh, well, I remember actually being to a bison ranch right here in the area, because Rittman Orchards, just down the road from here, had bison. And So I remember going there and actually going up to the area where the bison were, just out there grazing, and my gosh, yes, they're huge.
They're impressive. Whoa.
And that's what I love about your books. And under various other names, and we have a website where people can contact you and also look at the other things you do, and that has all your different names on it.
Yes.
But I remember under, I think it was the Kylie Logan series names, the Kylie Logan pen name, that you wrote the Put-in-Bay series.
Yes, that series was called The League of Literary Ladies, and it's set up at Put-in-Bay on South Bass Island. And it revolved around 5 women who are going to court-ordered book discussion group. And it's court-ordered because they are neighbors who can't get along with each other. And a magistrate decides, you know what, if you just talk to each other, maybe you could be friends. So he orders them to be a book club. So each mystery in that series, and there were 5 in that series, each mystery is based upon the classic book they're reading. So the first one was Mayhem at the Orient Express. The second one was A Tale of Two Biddies. My favorite title, I admit, was, and then there were nuns, because there are nuns visiting the island while they're reading Agatha Christie, of course. So that was a fun series too.
You put a lot of humor into your books, and I think it comes naturally. It doesn't seem like it's humor that you're saying, oh, I got to put something funny in here.
Right.
But it seems that your entire creative process includes humor, and I find that very appealing in the books.
Well, it actually depends what I'm writing. These are what we call cozy mysteries. The Red Hot Rancher and Mail Order Bride and the League of Literary Ladies. Cozy mysteries are sort of light. They can be funny. Quick reads, beach reads. I've also done another series under the Kylie Logan name, the Jazz Ramsey's Mysteries, which are set in Cleveland. Jazz lives in Tremont, the very hip and trendy neighborhood, and she trains and handles cadaver dogs. Those books are less humorous. They're not cozies, they're more what we call traditional mysteries. They're more based in reality. In a cozy mystery, crazy things can happen and nobody questions it. The craziest thing that happens is the heroine, who in this case owns a mystery bookstore, a romance bookstore, is out there solving mysteries. You know, I'm doubting many of us get up in the morning and say, I think I'll solve a murder today. But in a cozy mystery, we're willing to suspend that disbelief and have that fun. In more of a traditional mystery, like the cadaver dog mysteries, that doesn't happen. My heroine just doesn't wake up and say, I think I'll take my cadaver dog out and we're going to find a body and we're going to solve a mystery. There has to be a very compelling reason for that character to get drawn into solving the mystery. So those books are more serious. But yes, the cozies, yeah, let's have fun with it.
Well, in any books that you write, the traditional or the cozy, I guess, subgenre of the traditional,
Sure.
I see a lot of similarities between them, but your characters come alive, and your characters are not stereotypical characters. What I love in the newest one, well, in both of the Mimi Granger books, is just the liveliness of the characters and the individual characters, the individuality of the characters, I should say. For instance, I wouldn't stereotypically think that here we have this Lizzie Hale who has a romance bookstore, which already is a unique aspect, but who's the guy she's attracted to? He's a park ranger from Texas who loves country music.
And baseball.
And baseball, yes.
And that's what actually brings them together. Lizzie is something of a baseball nerd, and that's what initially brings them together. They can talk baseball.
And again, that's the result of the research and your own personal knowledge of, well, of baseball in this case. But it adds that sense of believability to something, as you said, that is unbelievable.
It's absolutely unbelievable. Isn't it great?
Yes, definitely it is. And I've read you under all your names, and I enjoy them all, no matter whether you're being serious, whether you're being humorous, or whether it's contemporary or historical, because you're also involved in writing historical.
Yes, yes. I have a new series starting in February under a new name because, hey, why not be more than one person, right? The name is Anastasia Hastings. That is not included on my website yet. We haven't added Anastasia yet. But they're called the Dear Miss Hermione Mysteries. Notice how I had to think. The Dear Miss Hermione Mysteries. They're set in London and the English countryside in 1885. And one of the things that was big then, still big, was advice columnists. Think Ann Landers. Think Victorian Ann Landers. They were called agony ants. And the agony ants were huge. Newspapers ran their columns, magazines ran their columns, and people would write to an agony ant for advice. And, you know, how do I announce my daughter's engagement, or how do I set the silver on the table? Whatever their concerns were. How do I make my crinolines stiffer? You know, and for lots of complicated reasons, my heroine, whose name is Violet, is given the job of Miss Hermione, the most famous of the agony ants, and the letters she gets involve her in mysteries.
Oh, that sounds like it's going to have that aspect of humor to it too. But would you consider that one as being what do you want to say, traditional or cozy?
I'd say it's traditional. There are some, I hope there is some humor in it, unless it falls flat and nobody realizes it's supposed to be funny. But I think it's more traditional. Not heavy on history, but let's face it, if you're picking up a historical book, you want some history in there. So talk about research. It's tough, even just the language. Something happens in the first book. The first book is called Of Manners and Murder, and something happens in that book, and I wanted to use the word hooligan. Not in 1885, I can't. It hadn't been coined yet. So there's things like that you have to think about with a historical that you don't in a contemporary. But again, I'm loving that research, so getting sucked back into Victorian England doesn't sound like a bad thing to me.
Well, you have a new name, you said, Anastasia Hastings, as your pseudonym for that one. I know there are also several other authors, many others, who have multiple pen names, but why you?
It depends what I'm writing. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. I once upon a time wrote a paranormal mystery series, the Pepper Martin Mysteries. I wrote those as Casey Daniels. There were 10 in that series. But at the time, I thought of writing a cozy that didn't have ghosts in it. And my publisher was worried if I used the Casey Daniels name, people would automatically expect a paranormal element. So that's how I became Kylie Logan. And then Kylie wrote a whole bunch of cozies, as we mentioned, the League of Literary Ladies and others, and the Jazz Ramsey series. But then, so Mimi, for instance, as you mentioned, is more light and humorous. Kylie changed from cozies to traditionals. Casey wrote paranormals. So Anastasia Hastings writes historicals. So it depends what I'm writing. That's the name I use to go with the kind of book it is. So when a reader picks up that book, they know what they're going to get.
Well, You have written so many books. In fact, I've lost track of how many you've written. Do you have like a guesstimate of how many you've written?
I think it's about 68 right now, but I've lost track too. Every once in a while, as I'm falling asleep, I try to count, and then I just get all mixed up. But they're all on the website, every single one of them.
Oh, that's great, because I know that you've been writing a long time now, and books do go out of print and that, but generally you can find them online one way or another, either through interlibrary loan or through the secondary market.
Sure, used books for the really old ones, or so many books are now also ebooks, Kindle or Nook or Apple Books, and those of course never go out of print. So you can generally find the books. My old romances I started with, probably not. But you know what? If there's ever a book you want, there's a contact button on my website. Send me an email, let me know. It might be in my closet.
You never know.
There's a lot of books in there.
Well, I have enjoyed them all. And this is the question that I've been told all authors hate.
Uh-oh.
But I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
And that is, where do you get your ideas?
It depends. It depends what book I'm writing. I mentioned the Jazz Ramsey Cadaver Dog books. I belong to a dog club, and we once had a speaker, a cadaver dog handler. And it was so fascinating that I knew I wanted to write a book about that. It took a few years between hearing that woman speak and actually writing the book, but it was always in my head. Excuse me. I did another series about an antique button collector, simply because I like antique buttons. Buttons are cool. They're little works of art. So that was that. The agony ant that I'm working on now came up because, again, I was doing research on what I don't know, why I don't know. But there was a mention of these agony ants and how popular they were. And I just thought it was fascinating. So this is a way, it's a way for me to explore things that interest me. So ideas come from everywhere. Sometimes you'll overhear a snatch of conversation and you think, oh, wow, that would be cool in a book. And so I mean, obviously that doesn't give you the whole book, but it gives you a little kernel of an idea, and you can start working on that and say, okay, then what could happen after that? And oh yeah, that's interesting, how about this? So where do you get your ideas? Everywhere. Everywhere. Ideas fall from the sky. They're out there.
Well, that kind of takes us back to what we were talking about earlier, the blending of fact and fiction. You know, you pick up a little idea here, you see something, you hear something, and it spurs an idea that you then are able to turn into a work of fiction. And it's not that easy.
No, some days are easier than others. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. For instance, the romance bookstore. Okay, there's an idea. I used to write romance, let's write a mystery series in a romance bookstore. But that doesn't get you far. Then you start playing the what if game. Well, what if a murder happens there? Or what if a customer's murdered instead? Well, who owns this bookstore? And the setting thing again, where is this bookstore? Who are the people who live in the town? So the initial idea comes, and then you're looking for these other ideas. Who are these people? What do they do? What are their names? I think one of the hardest things for me at this point, after 68 books, is naming people. I've used all the names. So that gets really tough. So yeah, ideas can be slippery.
Well, you seem to be able to get out there and pick them up. And I think, too, it was recognizing what is the germ of an idea that can be turned into something.
Well, and I think you need to be open to that. So if you're a writer, just do that. Just play that game. You walk outside today and it's raining and you write science fiction and you're saying to yourself, well, what if somebody can change the weather? You know, you have to use real life as a jumping off point, but don't let that stop you. Don't let it hold you back. Start playing with it and see where it takes you.
And it can take you just about anywhere.
It sure can, which is why I don't write science fiction. That scares me. There's too many possibilities there.
Oh my gosh. Well, tell us again how people can reach you.
The website is mystery-book-series.com. All my names are on there except for Anastasia at this point, but she'll get there eventually. All my books under each name are there. There is also a contact button, as I mentioned, and you can hit that, send me an email. There is also a link to sign up for my newsletter. I don't send them out real often, so you don't have to worry about getting drowned. I will send a newsletter out when there's a new book or if there's some fabulous ebook sale or some other thing that's going on. So maybe once every couple months.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you with us, and I always look forward to your upcoming books and rereading the old ones too. And everyone, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. I hope you've enjoyed today's show and you'll tune in again. And for RSVP, I'm Irma Baker.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.